Good evening and welcome to the Monday night edition of the Gold, Goats, and Guns Hour here on YouTube and Periscope. My name is Tom Luongo. I hope you all had a great weekend. It is Monday, July 30th, 2018. So, I got a couple of things I want to talk about tonight. And the least of which is the BRICS summit from over the weekend. I don't have a lot to say about this. I think the most interesting thing that came out of the BRICS summit was Turkey. And I wrote an article this morning over my blog over at goldgoatsandguns.com that you can read on the subject. And I've talked about Turkey a lot in recent weeks because I feel that it is an incredibly important player as we move forward. We're also going to talk about Trump's press conference this afternoon with Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte. And I also want to talk about a couple other things relative to Trump. The most, not the least of which is his mulling over or attempting to change tax law such that that we would index capital gains tax for inflation. And so what I'm thinking is, and I want to talk about that as well as there's an article by Elijah Magnier about Syria and President Assad's effectively laying down an ultimatum to Bibi Netanyahu that Israel can forget Iran leaving Syria anytime soon until Israel effectively puts its dick back in its pants. On that note, I'll take a sip of coffee. And I know that will not be a popular... I'm not telling you that that's what I think. I'm telling you that's what Assad thinks. And Assad is in a position now where he does not have to listen to much of what the Israelis say, because the realpolitik of the situation is that while Putin is doing everything he can to de-escalate the situation, the Israelis refuse to de-escalate. They keep shooting down Syrian planes. They keep bombing targets inside Syria when they're not supposed to be. They continue to act along with the Americans, along with the Turks and everybody else in an illegal manner. And Assad's getting sick of it because he knows that the future is one in which he stays in power in Syria. At the same time, there are that the BRICS summit just ended yesterday or the day before. The next round of Syrian quote-unquote peace talks are opening up in Sochi, where Russia, Turkey, and Iran are going to sit down and continue the Astana process of crafting a political solution for Syria post-civil war. Understand that Assad can say those things to Netanyahu now because the Kurds in the east are waking up to the fact that the Americans are going to throw them overboard. They've woken up to the fact that there's no future for them in Syria if they don't make a deal with Assad. They're opening up diplomatic offices all over Syria. Damascus, Homs, Idlib, Palmyra, whatever. All of that is happening. The Americans refuse to take part in the process and yet continue to try and dictate to everybody what's going to happen in the future. Trump's press conference today with Giuseppe Conte was disquieting from a couple of different perspectives, because he was emphatic that the sanctions on Russia will stay exactly where they are and nothing's going to change. Conte was kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth. everybody, both sides agreed that they want the Trans-Adriatic pipeline to go through, which is the insanely expensive one coming from Azerbaijan, all on the coast of the Caspian, trucked all the way across to bring in a trickle of LNG when the Russians and the Turks are building Turkstream, which is literally 5 times that for 1/2 the cost, or 1/3 the cost. But that's okay. The Europeans have spent billions on the Trans-Adriatic pipeline. It'll make Trump happy. And if that makes Trump happy, and he gets more, and Conte gets more support from Trump to take on the European Union, then it's going to happen. It's not going to solve anything in Europe. They still need twice the amount of LNG that's coming into the country that they are. We're going to build, now all of a sudden everybody's going to start building ports to take our tankers. All that means is that, the Russians can't build that many more pipelines into Europe. And Europe wants to move to LNG and off of nuclear. Well, I got news for you. It takes a lot of LNG to replace nuclear power. So Trump can whine and complain about it being unfair that our private oil companies have to compete with the Russian state-owned oil company. And he can play that private versus public game. But let's not kid ourselves. He knows as well as everybody else that the United States government policy subsidizes ExxonMobil, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, and the rest of them through the Exim Bank, the World Bank, the IMF, the BIS, the Federal Reserve, and everything else. Our outlandish and outrageous privilege of printing the world's reserve currency is what is keeping Russia from completely privatizing Rosneft and Gazprom. Don't kid yourself. That's just reality. This is the reality of the situation. It's not what I want as a free trader or not a free trader. And it's not about that. It's not about my politics. It's about the reality of the situation, that there's a reason why China has a mostly closed capital account. There's a reason why the Russians why the ruble is not freely convertible. There are reasons for these things. Good evening, William. How are you? And thank you, WDM. I saw your note. I just wanted to have my opening monologue kind of before I acknowledge anyone. So not only was there that, but then on top of that, the other disquieting thing was Trump's attitude on, it was Conte talking about how we have to follow the Minsk protocols for solving Ukraine. Come on, dude. This please, let's not parrot any party line from Merkel and Macron and the rest of them. It's not going to happen. I don't see it as a great victory that Trump is getting more money flowing back through NATO. I don't see that as a great victory. NATO is supposed to be obsolete. Why do we care that more the European countries are throwing in more money? Unless we pull our money back, what's the point? So when you look at all of that, is it any wonder why dealing with this country under hybrid war attack from a supposed NATO ally, Erdogan, the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, would ask explicitly to join the BRICS alliance? Now, I went over it in my blog post this morning about why Erdogan either wanted this or needs this. Take your pick. I think it's a bit of both. By officially joining the BRICS alliance and becoming like the BRICS, kind of like the PICS, right? He gets access to all of the institutions that they've built. He has access to the BRICS Bank. He gets access to the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. He gets access to all of those things. If the BRICS are to develop a joint cryptocurrency, we've got a report yesterday that Iran is seriously considering its own version of the Venezuelan petro for taking and clearing oil exports. You understand you'd understand the need for this, for something to change. Turkey's not going to throw Iran overboard. Turkey needs the energy too badly. Turkey needs Turkey needs that. There's an opportunity through bilateral trade with China to keep the Turkish corporate bond market from completely imploding. Martin Armstrong had a great blog last week talking about the proper role of a central bank. Now, I don't consider there is a proper role for a central bank, but if you assume that central banks exist, which they do, and I just need to make sure I virtue signal my libertarian and Austrian economics bona fides here, that I don't like central banks. I think they're anathema to civil society, but they exist. And so the proper role for a central bank would be to swap out illiquid corporate paper because of underlying currency liquidity issues. And so that's what the central bank's supposed to do. That's what that's what the Fed was originally designed to do. It was only to do what most other central banks, certainly what the Russian central bank did during its ruble crisis of 2014. It's what the Turkish central bank is doing now during the lira crisis of 2018, which is to pull off the market dollar-denominated corporate paper, swap it out with lira-denominated equivalents, and keep the economy flowing by not having the entire banking system seize up. That's its job, is to keep the markets liquefied. Not like what we did in 2008 to bail out all the banks, print trillions of dollars, export that inflation around the world, make it all the other central banks' problem and all the other economies' problems, while the banks got to dump all of their toxic assets on the Fed's balance sheet at par and screw everybody over and create 10 years of stagflation, which is what it's done. Wage stagnation, rising household costs, static wages, and effectively commodity inflation. Food prices are a lot higher than they used to be. And then all that shit's indexed for, and then the Fed just changes the metrics by which they, using heuristics, they change the metrics of how they measure inflation in order to shrink the number when the number is ridiculous. Green Penguin asks, so how could Trump really pull the money back on NATO? I think you're talking about NATO before the election. Boomers might believe the traitor narrative. Well, boomers already do believe the traitor narrative, so there's not much to lose. Trump doesn't have a whole lot of political capital. He's not going to pull money back from NATO anytime soon. Okay. I don't have a link to it in the description of the article as of right now, but I think I will. There's a great article by Jim Jatras over at Strategic Culture Foundation. Jim's a great guy, former diplomat, going over a lot of Trump's strategies and where he is and where we are with NATO and the rest of it. And Jim's somewhat convinced that we're going to lose the House, though Trump may retain control of the Senate, and if he loses control of the House, there'll be impeachment hearings. And if they get rid of Trump after the midterms, I'm not saying this is my attitude. I think it's an article that you should read. It's an argument you should read. I'm not saying I agree with it, but it is at least plausible in some ways. And if that's the case, if they cheat well enough in enough House races, that we wind up with Pence and Nikki Haley. President Pence and Vice President Nikki Haley as the neocon dream team. Now, I've been of the opinion that even if they were to do something like that, that would spark a real, honest-to-God civil war in this country. I don't know. All right, Ari asks up front, and if you're typing questions in from Periscope and they're not coming through, I don't know what's going on. Because I'm not seeing certain things come in from the YouTube stream. Oh, there's Tony Sankey. How are you, bud? Yeah, we do need 2/3 of the Senate to block all that. I don't think that's going to happen. So if the House impeaches, there's a very good chance that you'll have a whole lot of weak people just roll over. If there was ever a time that that the markers get called in on all of these guys who are completely compromised behind the scenes, because what else is that data? What else is that native NSA facility in Utah for? I know they need 2/3 to impeach. I think you'll get it under the right conditions. I know. I think you can get it. Does it wind up being civil war at that point? I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. But you have to, you got to at least consider the situation. Because look, under those circumstances, how many friends is Trump going to have? This is Washington, dude. What has he got? 6? Has he got 6 people in the Senate he can really rely on? Maybe 8? Everybody else will turn on him. Especially if he really, truly threatens everything. We'll see. I could be wrong, but it's something we need to consider. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. I'm saying it's something worth considering and not dismissing out of hand. There we go. So Ari Magoo asked earlier, are the BRICS any threat or not yet? The BRICS are not. In what respect are the BRICS a threat is the real question you have to ask yourself. The real question you have to ask yourself is, what's Trump's goal? And again, I refer you to that article by Jim Chatras because it's really, really astute. It's one of those things I wish I had written. And I don't say that often. You guys know how arrogant I am. Because it's very obvious that what Trump is trying to do, and there's also a great article by Alistair Crook on SCF today as well. And the two of them together paint a very interesting picture about what's happening with Trump's foreign policy. And it looks to me, and I have to agree with both of them, that Trump is that, one, we have Kissinger effectively coming out and going, look, the old ways of doing things are over. That's what Alistair Crook's article was about, is an interview that Kissinger gave recently saying that, look, the old ways of doing things, the old ways of prosecuting foreign policy, the old ways of thinking about the game board, they're gone. There was never going to be reality that we were going to march Western culture across the world, across Russia and into China. That was never going to happen. And the neocons and the liberal interventionists in Europe and the United States don't understand this. And we've gotten to that point where now, okay, if you won't accept being, certainly the neocons' position is this, if you will not accept our way of life and what we have to offer, we will exterminate you. And I think that Trump is hip to the situation, that he understands that the unipolar world that we think we want here in the West, or that the power that be want in the West, is over. It's not going to happen. Russia and China are not going to capitulate on this. And so they've been asking for a multipolar world, a tripolar world. And Trump is in some ways trying to accommodate them. And he feels that the best way to do that is to pull back on the empire. I happen to agree with him. Almost completely. It's a very generous view of what Trump's trying to do. It's a very generous view of his foreign policy, but I think it's the right one. And that he honestly wants to clean the world up of unstable countries having nuclear weapons. Well, then he should look at Israel. Just saying. And he should get rid of all of the contradictions in his foreign policy stances. So if you're going to lambaste Iran for what it does, if you're going to send Pompeo out there to give insane friggin' speeches about how we don't want to overthrow Iran, we just want to get rid of their government, effectively, then when are we going to stop, genuflecting to the fucking Saudis and the insane Israelis? Could we do that? Could we apply a standard of behavior to people who are our enemies as well as our allies that's consistent? Could we do that? This is what's undermining Trump's validity in foreign policy. It's what's undermining the validity of his position in foreign policy. Okay? You can't do that. It's why all of his threats against Iran ring really hollow. It's why nobody believes him. Okay? It's why Russia and China aren't going to blink or bluff on Iran giving up their sovereignty. Because they know damn well that we're not giving anything up to the Israelis, we're not giving anything up to the Saudis. So why should they give up Iran when Iran is critical to their long-term plans? They're not going to. In the same way that they're going to flip Turkey. Tony Sankey, User 13 says quite explicitly, when the neocons lose Kissinger, you know the world has changed. Trump ain't going to lose what? Chrome Man. He's going to lose on Iran. I'm telling you. He lost on North Korea. What's playing out in Iran with Iran right now, the war of words, is the exact replay of 2017. The North Koreans had a nuke. The South Koreans and the North Koreans wanted reunification. Eventually, they basically turned to the United States and said, do it. Now here, how about save face? How about we do this in order to allow you to save face? And that's exactly what happened. But as far as winning the hybrid war against Iran, he might get Iran to, quote unquote, give up their nuclear weapons or agree to a different deal or whatever. That's not a win. That's already baked into the cake, guys. That's not a win. It's already real. Getting Iran out of Syria? No, the real question is whether or not you can keep Israel within its borders. And Assad, again, basically said, without a shred of equivocation, we will take back the Golan Heights. This is a non-starter for the Israelis. So now what? Don't worry about Turkey being in the north part of Syria. They'll leave. If Erdogan wants to be in the BRICS, he'll have to take his people back across the border, back into Turkey. But Assad's not complaining about those guys. He knows exactly what that's doing. That's keeping the Americans from... I disagree completely. Sorry. I disagree completely that there's a popular revolt happening in Iran anytime soon. I think we Americans like to watch television too much. And we like to watch whatever it is that we're told to watch. In the same way that Iranian press TV shows thousands of people marching in the streets of Portland against Trump, or 500,000 people marching on Washington with vaginas on their heads, and it's the same shit. It's propaganda. And the truth of the matter is that it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Trump still thinks, like the rest of them, because he's been told this by everybody, and they're wrong, that you can blow up a currency and change the country. I know it's brewing. I know it's like I know, but it's not going to happen over the currency. And it's not going to happen because Trump wants it to happen. I will be shocked if there's quote unquote revolution in Iran. And the United States, and even if there is, as I've talked to Iranians about this as well, what will happen will be a military takeover. Soleimani will be in charge. He's no more what's the word I'm looking for? Who is no more, happily predisposed towards the Americans than anybody than the mullahs are. They're still pushing this insane idea that they can put the MEK in charge in Iran. Do you understand that that's what they think is they're going to do? That's what these people are. I mean, they're insane. And don't discount that because somehow Trump knows shit or whatever. It's nonsense. Trump's understanding of Iran is paper thin. It's what he's been told by most American intelligentsia. And AIPAC. Don't for a second think that he knows that much more, because he's not that kind of guy. Okay? He's not. I mean, I like Trump. Don't get me wrong. I think a lot of what he's doing is correct. I just think he's completely off base on Iran. Thordum says in response, Tony, if Iran would take the offer and negotiate with Trump, Trump would get exactly the same deal Obama signed. Trump just hates everything Obama created. That is very true. I'm not sure I completely agree with that, Thordum, but about 90% I agree with you on that. The deal would be a little different. Israel will still bang their shoes on the frickin' table and complain, while Netanyahu tells even more lies about everything that's going on in the world, because that man is literally the most dangerous man in the world. I fucking hate Bibi Netanyahu, and he needs to be removed from office. The Israelis had any fucking shame at this point, they would just finally just get rid of him and let's sue for frickin' peace. Never forget, yes, I agree. Trump knows what his handlers allow him to know. I am still of the opinion that he and Putin talked about things. I understand Trump's negotiating tactics, Chrome Man, brilliantly. I think what's going on right now is a classic art of the deal, lobbing bombs at each other. Justin Raimondo said it the other day, and Jim Jatras said, I'm not sure. Get it this way. They were calling each other Dotard and Little Rocket Man, and 6 months later they were in Singapore. Whatever, 6-8 months later they were in Singapore. It's the same thing. Rouhani will go and sit down with Trump. There's no doubt in my mind. But in the same way that Putin and Trump didn't have a whole lot to talk about, because there's not a whole lot for Trump to offer Putin, because there wasn't, and anybody who thinks otherwise is fooling themselves. They were able to have a good conversation. They were able to gain some trust. They were able to change some things. They were able to change the dialogue behind the scenes and all that stuff. And that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. The Helsinki summit was fantastic. I wished for more. I got what I expected. Okay? You shit in one hand, you wish in the other, and you see which one fills up first. Okay, fine. So fundamentally think that Trump doesn't have a lot to offer Iran. He's going to learn right now what's happening in Turkey. And I want you to read what's happening in Turkey. Read my article on Turkey this morning and read all of my articles on Turkey, because they all effectively are variations on the same thing. And which is that Turkey has friends in high places. Okay? It has China, it has Russia, it has other friends who can mitigate the worst aspects of the hybrid war. And with the Turkish bank taking the same route, that the Russians did, radically raising interest rates, allowing the currency to fall, supporting the local supporting corporates by buying up their corporate paper. They're doing exactly the same thing that the Russians did, opening up bilateral swap agreements with China, who's one of their biggest trade partners. By doing all of these things, Turkey will de-dollarize its economy. It will get bad, and then it will start to get better, slowly by inches, by degrees. And over the course of a year or two, all of this will be behind them. And then once you go nuclear, you have no other option. That says it's like a game of beat the clock with Trump to see how much he can get done before the midterms. Very good. And it is what he's trying to do. I mean, understand that foreign policy wins at this point, since everything else has been blocked. And he did come out and say that he will shut down the government in September in order to get the wall funded, which was not disquieting. That was the thing he should do. These are things to shore up the base going into the midterms, without a doubt. Ari, I know you're being sarcastic when you say if we're anti-Bibi, we may be anti-Semitic. Yeah, I mean, I know. It is what it is. If you're anti-Bibi, you are anti-Semitic, in most people's minds. Yeah, I mean, the problem is that everything he's doing right now, I agree with Thordoom, is that whatever Trump is doing right now is actually boosting the government's popularity. It's actually going to make you cannot attack a country. They're not stupid. People, this is the thing that I cannot think. No problem, Tony. You take care. You have a good night. What I cannot understand is our policymakers think everybody is a freaking IQ 60 moron. They really are so unbelievably arrogant as to believe. No, he said he would take Iraq's oil. He's not taking Iran's oil. That's not happening. He's not going to change. He's not going to win this battle. Okay? He's not. We're crashing on the rocks of Afghanistan. We're not winning in Afghanistan. We're suing for peace in Afghanistan. We're coming home. Trump is bringing all these people home. All the people in Syria, they're coming home. Afghanistan, suing for peace with the Taliban. We're coming home. Trust me on this one. This is what's going to happen. The art of the deal only works when you have leverage. So you bombast and you kick your feet and you stamp your feet and you bang your shoe on the table and you say insane things. And you see how they jump. I know you are, Ari. I know. It's not about they. This is a completely different thing. Okay? Ignore those people. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm on Trump's side. I'm one of the guys who said early on he was going to win. So understand that. I don't know if you know that or not. I've gone over that in the scope many times. In March of 2016, I said he was going to win. All we're doing is creating a common enemy for the Iranian people to hate, just the same way that if they were doing it to us, the same way that look at how insane the left is over the idea that the Russians took Facebook ads out and hacked our election. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! How could they do something like that? anybody with like fucking 3 brain cells to rub together and make a spark and analyzes and sees one iota of shit that goes on and who's watched one episode of The Americans, for Christ's sake, knows that the Russians and the Americans interfere in each other's day-to-day government operations every day. So it's not, I'm not saying that Trump isn't capable. He's gonna win on a great number of fronts that people said he couldn't win on. I'm saying on this particular front, this is where he's not going to win. He's not going to rip Russia from Iran and China. He's not going to rip Iran from Russia and China. That triangle is solid. And as long as it's a triangle, it's going to be solid. It's not about what I want. I'm telling you what's happening. I mean, do you want to be reassured about what my position in this is? My position is irrelevant. It's what's happening that's important. What do I want to see? I want to see us pull out of Afghanistan. I want to see us get out of Syria. I want to see us pull the empire back from around the world. I want a grand bargain in the Middle East. I want the Iranians to go home from Syria, and they will, but they will only go if the Israelis are bottled back up with their dick in their pants back behind the freaking line, where Syria gets to say, we won this war, we get the Golan Heights back. I got news for you. Assad's got a battle-tested army full of Russian equipment and Russian EW and Russian planes that just fought a 3-year war on the ground, which the Israelis can't fight. The only people the Israelis can beat up on the ground are Gazans throwing friggin' water balloons. And everybody knows this. The Israeli Air Force, fantastic. The Israeli ground forces, no. That's just reality. You'll notice that they're not going after they're not going to go after Lebanon. They know better. Hezbollah will wipe them out. And everybody knows it. And Israel will have to go nuclear. And they can't go nuclear. So they're not going to attack. They do these things because they think they can get away with them, because the Americans have their back, because Putin is still trying to craft a solution to the problem. If it came down to a ground war between Syria and Israel, with the Iranian Quds forces on the ground and Hezbollah from the north, yeah, Israel would be in serious freaking trouble. And everybody knows it. And I don't want to see that happen. Well, I've been hard on, and this is why I'm angry with Netanyahu. This is why I'm angry with Avigdor Lieberman, the defense minister. This is why I don't like what I see. It's why I get angry with them, because all I see is them trying to push the scenario as far as it can go in their favor and punch everybody in the face as many times as possible. They're implicated completely in this civil war in Syria. Assad has hundreds of thousands of people dead and millions displaced over their policy. He has every right to be angry. He has every right to friggin' come back and destroy Israel if he wanted to. He was invaded, for fuck's sake. And he hasn't done it. Which is to his credit. It's the Israelis that refuse to accept reality. They will not accept the reality here, which is that they've lost. And they need to sue for peace. And the only reason it's continuing on the way it is because of the unbelievable amount of influence that AIPAC and the Saudi Arabians have inside the United States government, which Trump, for all of his strengths, can't undo in a day. User 13 rightly points out the Israelis better figure out how to make boomers live forever to keep their American support, because once the boomers die off, their support's gone. which is why a grand bargain in the Middle East needs to happen sooner rather than later, which is why Trump needs to figure out a way to craft that deal, which is why Putin is working overtime diplomatically to try and get Netanyahu to see fucking reason. While that asshole goes out on Twitter and tells friggin' tall tales until what's left of his hair falls out of his head. The son of a bitch. Guy's a fucking war criminal, for Christ's sake. That won't win me any subscribers. I don't want to see anybody wiped off the map. I don't want to see any more people die over stupid and cynical geopolitical imperatives. I don't want to see anybody die over 1,000-year-old arguments over what piece of holy ground someone stole from somebody else. Thordoom reminds us the amount of equipment made by Israel found in liberated areas is endless. Same thing with American military hardware. These guys are leaving it all behind. The Syrian army now has all their weapons too. It's like the guys in the Donbass. We send weapons over to the friggin' Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army, the Donbass says boo. They all drop their fucking weapons and run. And they pick them up and they take them back and they use them against them the next time. I want to see peace in the region. That's what I want. You ask me what I want, that's what I want. And there's a solution. I've said this many times, and what gets my goat and gets me angry is the fact that the fucking people who are in charge of some of the most powerful countries in the world refuse to see reason. No, Assad will wait them out because he'll do whatever Putin tells him to do. But know this. We've talked about this in multiple scopes, and the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced of what people have been saying, which is that Assad will, and what Assad said over the weekend is absolutely correct. What will happen here is Assad will get the Golan Heights back. If the American empire goes backwards, if the neocons lose power, which they are losing, Israel's going to lose influence the world over. Nikki Haley will be in mourning. She'll have to wear black. She'll have to wear a black armband everywhere. Am I familiar with the work of Israel Shahak? No, I'm not. I just don't misunderstand. Everybody's dirty in this thing. Everybody's dirty. We're dirty. The Israelis are dirty. The Turks are dirty. The Saudis are dirty. The Iranians are dirty. The Lebanese are dirty. The Syrians are dirty. Everybody's dirty. Everybody's dirty. There comes a point where you just have to say, all right, enough is enough. We're all dirty. We've all done terrible things. But these fucking sociopaths in charge of the Israeli government, they need to go. They do. They absolutely do. And we need to purge them from our vote. We need to purge them from the Senate. I know we've always backed Israel because the Jews don't want to get wiped out by the Arabs. And so they've spent billions and billions of dollars getting control of having influence in the corridors of power in the United States. I get it. If I were Jewish, I'm not even arguing with it. If I were Jewish, that's what I would have done. Viking dude. Have I taught you nothing? They're the same group of people who will fight harder to retain power, the left or the neocons. Have I taught you nothing? I mostly kid. Because they're flavors on Marxists, so it doesn't really matter. To me, they're a distinction without a difference. The neocons are not right wing. They're lefties. Masquerading as right wingers. So they're both fighting equally hard to retain power against the libertarian populist uprising happening across the Western world. Oh, interesting. Okay. I didn't know that about Shahak. I'm sorry. That's cool. I mean, I don't want to get all alt-righty here or anything. I'm not, I seriously don't want to go there. It's like I don't damn an entire religion for any reason. I don't damn an entire people for any reason. It's not about that. It's about the individuals in power, and it's about the individuals who make decisions that affect policy. Syria is not building nukes for Iran. North Korea was building nukes for Iran. That's another Netanyahu lie. The whole thing with North Korea and Iran has always been that North Korea was working on one half of the missile. The other was working on the nuclear warhead. The Iranians were working on the ballistic missile. Guess what? That's why Trump was so angry with the nuclear deal. Because it didn't stop the transfer of information from one to the other. That's why. Yes, User 13 is correct. The problem is that the Israelis, as a government, as a group, as a foreign policy advocate, have overplayed their hand all over the world, and it's going to come and bite them in the ass of every Jew in the world. And that's terribly unfortunate. Because there are millions of peaceful, wonderful, fantastic Jewish people, just like there are millions of lovely, wonderful Muslims, just like there are millions of lovely Catholics, even though the freaking Vatican is awful. Don't damn an entire people, a race, because of the people who run the religion or run the state. There's a fundamental difference between those two things. Okay, cynical skeptic. I'll be happy to get it in the DM. That'd be great. I look, man. I know. And here's the thing, though. At some point, you've got to let the past die. And I hate to quote Kylo Ren because that will trigger a whole lot of people. But sometimes you have to let the past die and start looking at tomorrow. And I think that in some ways, a lot of ways, what Trump is trying to do is to do that. And he's not being allowed to do that. And this is where I praise him. But I think that he's always had a blind spot when it comes to Iran. And I don't know what's going to happen long term. Every day that I'm convinced that it's going to be all right, the next day I'm like, oh, God. And then I'm like, that's going to be all right. No. I mean, and it's like this every freaking day. And it's not like I'm trying to be over emotional about it. I'm really trying to keep my head on. But when you read everything as things come out, it's hard. Because Assad is angry. And he has every right to be. And now he's winning. Putin's not going to change, or Trump's not going to change anything relative to Putin. Putin is going to continue to do everything he can to avoid a war. He's done that so far, and he's done it successfully, other than wiping up ISIS. But a broader war than Syria? Yes, Viking dude, sometimes in the same day. Oh my God, everything's going to be okay. Oh my God, everything's going to be okay. I mean, it's like, you know, there are times when I do jack out of all this. You know, I get done working at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon after having been dealing with this shit all day, and I just tune it out. Because if I don't, I go crazy. You know, sometimes when I have to sit down and do one of these scopes, I'm like, man, I've already been working 10 hours. I really don't want to do this tonight. What am I going to talk about? Oh shit, let's talk about that. So, good evening, Dozer. How are you? So I think the situation with Turkey is very interesting. I think, going back to my original point, I think the situation with Turkey is very interesting. Okay, Joanne Leon's finally popped in. Yes, the plan for the Kurds as a proxy ground force has collapsed completely. The Kurds have already opened up they're opening up diplomatic offices all around Syria. They've opened up negotiations with Assad. I think they're going to be present at the Sochi peace talks. So it's all moving forward. Honestly, everything about Syria is all over but the crying, and the ones doing the crying are the Israelis. And at some point, Putin's going to lay down the law to Netanyahu, and I just think it's going to be really ugly for him. A neocon trekking across New Guinea meets a cannibal and says, quote, "I can't believe you kill people and eat them." And the cannibal replies, "I can't believe you kill people and don't eat them." Interesting, WDM. We did, Joanne. Joanne's wondering if we really intended for the Kurds to be ground forces against Iran as well. Yes, because we were promising them the Greater Kurdistan, which is the northwestern portion of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and then eastern Syria and the eastern half of Turkey. And they were going to carve out Greater Kurdistan, which we were going to control as a puppet client state. The Russians have created a template, which is what I was trying to say earlier. Yes, so going back to Turkey, the situation with Turkey is very interesting because the Russians have created the template for how to de-dollarize their economy. The Turks are now going to follow it, and the Iranians are doing the same thing. Yeah, pretty much. Everybody will be at Sochi except the U.S. and Israel. Yeah, that's the way it's been at all rounds of the Astana peace talks. This is like the 10th meeting over 2 years. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before I leave, because it's 53 minutes, so I don't want to go much longer. I do want to talk briefly about this thing with Trump, this proposal by Trump to index capital gains for inflation. I know this is like completely off base, but I do want to shift gears a little bit. I know that, Joanne, that the Kurds are all factional and regional and everything else, but I know that was the plan. And that should give you an idea of how freaking out of touch and how stupid and how stupid really smart people can be in real life when given way too much power and the ability to draw lines on maps. Before I do the last bit here about Trump's tax, one thing you have to remember, my wife is fantastic. And I don't know if you guys have watched her bread making video. I did a lot to cut that down because she spent but my wife is fantastic because she reads all the things that I don't have time for and don't necessarily have specific interest in. I do have specific interest in it, but I have her as a resource, and she reads all the stuff and then tells me about it. She's reading a bunch of books on the brain and how the brain is organized and everything else, and what the latest stuff that we understand about the brain, and about how the left brain and the right brain work, and where we are. And we are in a very left brain dominated world. And there are 3 things that categorize the left brain. In short, there's a lot more that goes on here, but I got 2 minutes to do this, so I can't do all of this. But the book that she's been reading is called The Master and Its Emissary. Don't know the guy's name. fascinating understanding of how the brain actually operates. And the left brain, 1, has to be right. 2, likes to be in control. And 3, can't see the forest for the trees, can't see the whole from all the individual parts, believes that it can take all the individual parts and make a whole out of it. And because of that, it will deny that which it does not agree with. That's very left brain dominated thinking. That's where we are. Much of the West is very left brain dominated. Israeli policy is very left brain dominated. And there are lots of reasons for that. And I'm not going to go into it tonight. But if you start to put those things together, some of the things that Jordan Peterson's talked about relative to those who have lost meaning in their life and how they are susceptible to kind of toxic ideology, you'll understand it. You'll understand why it all fits together. Not sure that I have it all worked out that I want to do an entire scope on it, but I probably will at some point. So the last thing I want to talk about, and because of that, there's a need for justice that has to happen here on Earth because there is no karmic justice. That's not really what's important, right? Traditional 95% of people's left brains. There are some left-handed people who are reverse-brained. About 50% of the left-handed people are reverse-brained, but the functions of the brain then are exactly the same. So what is normally left brain would be right brain in those people, and vice versa. The name of the book is The Master and Its Emissary. I do not know the guy's name. I could look it up if I had my Kindle library in front of me. Maybe I'll try and drop a link to it in the description to the video after I get done streaming. But the last thing I want to talk about, and I want to get to this because this is important, is Trump's latest proposal to index capital gains tax to inflation. So what he's talking about, because this is important from an investment perspective, and it's important to understand how it's going to be dealt with politically. It's something that we have not, it is something that is entirely tyrannical. Now, guys know that I'm libertarian, so I don't believe in taxes in the first place. I think taxes are theft. But let's think about this for a second. You buy a stock 40 years ago. You bought IBM back in the 70s for, $10 a share. It's $160 today. $160 today, how much does that actually buy in 1974 dollars? Should you really be on the hook for $150 in capital gains tax when you've paid taxes on the dividends that you've been paid for every quarter since then? And you paid taxes on the dividends because dividends are considered taxable income. No. I think it's a very interesting way it's going to be spun because most of the people who are going to benefit from it are, of course, the upper 1% of the society. But the truth of the matter is that from a functional perspective, capital gains tax, and this is also a big deal for the family, for family farms and family businesses, because those properties have risen so much in value that a lot of family farms in this country have been gutted or destroyed. I start talking about this stuff and we lose the stream for a minute. Have been gutted because of massive estate taxes, right? Because, they had this inherited land. It was in the family years. Their cost basis was zero. And then they die, the owner dies. And now all of a sudden the farm you're sitting there with a $2 million piece of property that you owe $1 million in estate taxes on. Or if you sell the property, you owe $1 million in freaking capital gains tax. Or $400,000 in capital gains tax. Shouldn't that be indexed for inflation? Shouldn't that be indexed for purchasing power? It's like you don't solve, it's the right thing to do because you don't solve one problem by solving another. So it's looking like my bandwidth is starting to drop. I think my wife might have come home and her phone came back on the network. So I'm going to talk about this more in the future, but just wanted to let you know, I think it's an incredibly important issue. And I like the fact that Trump is taking it on because even the middle class will benefit from this. Because people who have been holding, especially new coming up, people are on the verge of retirement, are going to be sitting on capital gains taxes on some of these, on like their Roth IRAs and whatnot. And if those capital gains taxes are not on a Roth, but on any investments that aren't held in IRAs, this is a great way for them to stretch their retirement dollars out because they won't be paying capital gains on that money. You should be able to pass on what you've built. You should be able to sell that for. You should be able to sell that and have your cost basis indexed for inflation. That's what's important here, is that you're talking about indexing the cost basis for inflation. So they're only paying the capital gains on the difference. So. All right, you guys take care. You have a great afternoon. If you like what you heard tonight, I'm not sure that you will, please like and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you're not a subscriber, please consider throwing me a couple dollars a month over at Patreon. Twice a week, I do market reports on Wednesdays and Sunday mornings. A midweek report on Wednesday and a weekly roundup on Sunday, about 15 minutes, where I go over charts and important markets and everything else. And we'll give you at least one good trading tip a week. All right, you guys take care. You have a great evening, and we'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.